Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. I'm joined by a very special guest today. This is Doug Wimbish.
Hey, Mitch.
Great to see you.
How you doing? Pleasure to see you as well.
So happy to have you here.
It's great to be here.
Living Colour, Mick Jagger, Joe Satriani, the list goes on and on and on. James Brown, George Clinton, Tackhead. I mean, it's an incredible list of people that you've worked with and great music you've created.
Well, thank you. The fact that you've mentioned Tackhead, you've mentioned the secret code word.
Is that right?
You must be very cool, bless you.
It's all good stuff. Industrial funk.
Yep.
It's so awesome, man. So awesome. So tell us a little bit about, well, let's start this way. You're here talking to the sales engineers today. You gave kind of a lecture this morning on bass effects and bass tones and things, which was very cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and then you're doing a recording workshop.
That's correct.
For a few days here. Tell us what's happening there, who you're bringing in to play with you, and what you'll be doing.
We will be doing a recording masterclass with drummer Daru Jones, guitarist Marcus Machado, and keyboardist Amp Fiddler. And we're going to have some fun.
Yeah.
We're going to have some fun.
I can imagine.
We're so happy to be here, and we're looking forward to the event.
Right. Now, is this a group that you work with normally, or did you put them together for this event?
Yes, this is a group that I work with. Daru and Marcus, we have a group called DMD. Basically, it's our initials, Daru, Marcus, and Doug. I'm always on the back end, and I like it. And for this event, Amp Fiddler is a friend of mine for many years. We met working with George Clinton many years ago. So knowing that we were going to be coming here and we had the option to actually bring a few more people in, Daru and Marcus were like, Amp would be the perfect addition to this lovely collection of love.
Nice, nice.
So we're looking forward to it. It's a great group, good guys, good frequency, and we're going to have the opportunity to just get together and play under the eyes and ears of an audience.
Right, yeah.
Which is cool.
That's pretty cool.
Which is cool.
So do you have music you've already created, or are you going to come in and improvise, or what's the thrust?
Well,
there?
here's the deal. We have a record that we recorded. It hasn't been released, but we did. The album has not been released, but we did release one single with a video. So what we're going to do while we're here in lovely Sweetwater, in the studios, in the facilities, we're going to re-record 2 of the songs. And because the original album that we did is all instrumental, now over time we've decided, you know, it'd be great because we played it out a little bit and people are digging it. And a lot of vocalists have come up and said, man, that's some great grooves. You know, it'd be great if you think I could put some vocals on it, or a horn player or whatever, or a guitar player. So now we're opening up the floodgates for all of this extra love and activity to come through. So. Nice. Amp being a great vocalist and a great keyboard player, and I sing and we all kind of vibe. So we're going to start to add lyrics and do other versions, kind of like remix versions of our own songs. Okay. Here live. Nice. And that's kind of the goal that we're going to be that we set out to achieve.
Right. Oh, that's going to be fun.
It's real. It's you know, it's a lot of fun. You know, when you're able to actually get together with friends. You know, and people that are kind of really cool. It makes it so much easier. Right. You know, I believe music is a reflection of your life. How you live, it comes out in your music. And if you're around other like-minded folks, then it's freedom. Sure. And this is one unit that I enjoy working with because of the character of each individual and what everybody brings to the table. Right. Right. It's good. That's awesome. That's awesome. So taking a step back, you're from Hartford, Connecticut originally, right? Yes. And you started on, did I see something? You started on mandolin? Yes. Yeah. Tell us the story. How did you end up on bass? Okay. Actually, I'm from Bloomfield, Connecticut, right next to Hartford. Okay. Right. And when I was about maybe 10 years old, it was almost this time of year. You know, growing up in a house in the neighborhood, this time of year is, you know, springtime's coming. People would have put stuff in their basements and they want to get rid of it. So once a year, maybe the town would allow a truck to come by and pick up your refrigerator or your, you know, dresser or whatever, because they get put to the curbside. So us kids were riding around. That was a great time for us because we're like, all the neighbors are throwing stuff out. So we're going to go run around and see what we can find, right? So, riding around on our bikes, went around. So when I got home, my next door neighbor, 2 retired teachers, had thrown away their content that was in the basement. In that was a mandolin and a banjo. So my sister and I were going through it, and she grabbed the banjo first, and I grabbed the mandolin. So then I took her to my mom and dad. I'm like, hey, Mom, Dad, the next door neighbors the woods threw away these instruments. Is it all right if we keep them? My mama said, well, Douglas, you have to go back and make sure that Mr. and Mrs. Woods didn't make a mistake. Maybe they made a mistake, and ask them if you can have it. So I did. And so they said yes, and that was my first instrument. And as it unfolds, that instrument was a 1919 or 1920 Gibson mandolin.
Wow.
And I did not know that at the time because I was too young. And another story with that is I got the instrument, scratched my name on it.
Right.
Fast forward, ended up maybe 10 years later, traded it in at a music store. And I knew something was going on because the guys, out of the other items that I had to trade in, they were like, we'll take the mandolin, right? You're not going to believe this. So I traded that in. And then about 4 years ago, I get a message on FaceTime, Facebook, and it's a guy in Seattle, Washington. And I did an interview like I'm doing with you right now, explaining that the history. The guy says, you know what, Doug, he left a message, I think I have your mandolin. He took a photo and showed me my signature on it. I'm like, wow. Come to find out, that's when I really realized that it was a Gibson 1917 F whatever.
Right.
I was too young to know what was going on. So that's the story of that. So I ended up playing, it had 8 strings, eventually not knowing what I was doing, banging around, just happy to have an instrument that I could call mine. 4 of the strings broke, I ended up with a 4-string instrument. And that was kind of like the beginning roots of why I'm in the 4-string lane right now.
Right.
If it makes any sense.
Sure. So you progressed pretty quickly, and in your mid-teens, you were already playing, doing sessions, and moving toward making pretty serious music.
Yeah, well, I was fortunate. I have an older brother and sister, and I have my mother's from the Bahamas, and I have kind of young uncles. Mm-hmm. So between both sides, between my siblings and my mom's brothers, I was able to be exposed to a lot of music at an early age. So my sister, she's a teenager, she'd want to go out to see some concerts, and my mother was like, take your younger brother with you, want to make sure you come back home, no kissing boys. And then my uncles in the Bahamas, my mother's from the Bahamas, Nassau, funky Nassau, and I would go down there for summer vacations. And 1969, around that time, the Jackson 5 had came out. And my uncles came up with the bright idea of telling everybody I was Jermaine Jackson in the Jackson 5. So, and the people believed it because there was only a newspaper and a radio station or television station. So they believed it, and that was another turning point in my life because they would usher me into a nightclub. I'm 13 years old, mustache, big Questlove afro. And my uncles would say, just sit there, don't say anything, let us do all the talking. So that became something that was, when you're a kid and you're in that kind of environment, it's in a nightclub, I'm watching these bands play. So I was saying, okay, well, I have a choice. Either I can, and I was playing around a little bit. Mm-hmm. I said, okay, this is the point of no return. Either I can take music seriously, or I'll be known as a person that's imitating Jermaine Jackson for the rest of my life. Right. I chose to take music seriously. Right. And that's kind of what happened. It was a combination of events that took place, like all kids, that are kind of like the things that change your course. So back at home, I started locally playing with some guys, not knowing what I was doing, but I learned by playing with elders. Right. And one thing progressed to another thing, and that progressed to another event, so on and so forth. And as time unfolded, I found myself in environments that I could learn from. Guitar players, keyboard players, there was only so much I can get out of a Mel Bay book at the time. There were no bass books, and I was playing guitar as well. So I was learning from the people that that was available in my world. So that's one thing. Small steps lead to bigger steps. But it was the elders that I was around that allowed me to be in their environment that made a big difference in my life.
Sure, right.
And then that's kind of how it started. And then other phases, graduate high school, get a job working in a hotel in Cape Cod, more elders. Then I started to meet some guys that had been on the road for quite a while, and they were from Ohio. Mm-hmm. And friends of the Ohio players had ended up relocating in New Haven, Connecticut, and then moved to Hartford. And then I ended up meeting them at the saxophone, Jackie McLean, jazz saxophone player, started an artist collective in Hartford, Connecticut, and I attended that, and then I met these elders there. and I was 17. And then the next youngest person in the band was 25 up to 40. So I was fortunate to be around elders that were able to be my mentors and learning from each individual that was in the band how to make music and how to find your voice.
Right.
In a self-contained band. We had a keyboard player, 2 guitar players, 3-piece horn section, vocalist, percussion player. You're kind of, a lot of bands had that combination back in the late 60s, early 70s.
Sure.
So that was really my proving ground was when I joined a band which was called Wood, Brass, and Steel. Mm-hmm. And they had already been in the studio. And I I'm not the architect, I'm the recipient. I was the young kid that was in the car driving down to New York City with these elders, and they knew everything. And I'm like, man, if my mom and dad knew what was going on right now, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you at the moment. But anyway, that's what happened.
Right. So the next big step, if I understand history correctly, is Sugar Hill Records.
Yes. So again, the same elders that I was working with, and their names were Skip McDonald, Harold Sargent, Otha Stokes, Hubert Powell, Randy Boss. They had already been to the owners of Sugar Hill Records. Joe and Sylvia Robinson had a label before Sugar Hill called All Platinum Records. Mm-hmm. And one day we recorded some songs. We were looking for a deal. These gentlemen had already been involved with the label prior. They left. And then there was, we got together as a new band, and then the guys were like, let's go and see if we can revisit let's try to get a deal. Went to New York City, kind of got, there wasn't much interest at that moment, but some guys were like, let's go back and see Joe and Sylvia Robinson. So because of the elders I was with, I ended up at All Platinum Studios. So I started off there in 1974, mm-hmm. 17. I just turned 18. And then because of the elders having a relationship with the company owners, I was fortunate to be in this scenario. So if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have been there. And then basically we were thrusted into recording not just for ourselves, but because they were also previously known as session musicians at the same label, they continued where they left off.
Right.
So so now I'm in this, we're in a self-contained band, but we're also asked to play on other people's records. So at that time, All Platinum Records had acquired the Chess catalog. And with that came Solomon Burke, Etta James, Wilson Pickett, and Jack McDuff, keyboard player, sure. Who George Benson was working with. So I'm the third string bassist at that time. There were 2 other gentlemen that were had their seats firm, but at the same time I was like 1974, and I was young, and I was kind of like my ears are open, and I'm listening to everything. So then the bass is in your face at that time. Larry Graham, Bootsy's coming out, Stanley Clarke. So now we're at the forefront of funk. And all of that. So I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. I'm listening to all the funk. I slowly worked my way into the lead chair. But that happened by the other 2 gentlemen that were in those chairs elevated and moved on and ended up going to work with other folks. But it was a sequence of events. That went on for 5 years as All Platinum. Mm-hmm. All Platinum folded, and then reemerged as Sugar Hill Records when Rapper's Delight was recorded, and the rest is history. Right. You played a bunch of great stuff. Yeah. What an amazing time. It's bananas. Yeah. It's like another lifetime. Right. But at the same time, it was very refreshing and rewarding, because when you're young and you're not jaded and you're around elders, you're happy to be around the elders. Right. And the key to that is just keep your mouth shut and don't say anything and just be cool. And if you're cool as a young kid, then they're like, yo, man, we got a young kid. He's playing bass and he's cool. Right. So that's the first thing. And then the other thing is showing up, answering the call, knowing your lane. So I learned in the recording studio and playing live, all running parallel. We do gigs at night, and and then we'd record during the day. And that went on for 5 years. By the time Sugar Hill came, I'm 22 going on 23, and I'm 5 years in working in studio environments.
Right.
So now I'm kind of like, I'm becoming more aware of this, of how things are, and I grew into the events that were taking place just by listening and learning, and always, just following my elders, following the elders.
Right. That's awesome. What a great way to learn.
That's really what took place.
Yeah. So I'm curious, we were talking earlier, I mentioned that Bootsy was here, and he was telling me how much his emphasis is on the one when he's playing funk, and how he hears the subdivisions and the rhythm around that. I'm curious how you approach that when you're playing funk music. How do you feel the beat, or how do you feel the subdivisions?
Well, Bootsy hit the nail on the head, and probably a lot of that came from his elders, and I'll dovetail into that. The drummer that was in the band that I was in, Wood, Brass, and Steel, one of the elders, he's from Cincinnati, Ohio. He grew up with Bootsy, but he was best friends of Bootsy's older brother, Catfish. And it was my friend, it was Harold and Catfish played bass. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Catfish played bass.
How about that?
Bootsy used to borrow his brother's bass when he was out, and then his Catfish would get pissed off and kind of like slap him up a little bit. Why are you borrowing my bass and stuff? And then my friend Harold, who was fresh out the Navy, really a solid guy, and he's from Ohio. He's telling Catfish, man, you better leave your brother alone, man. You better buy that boy a bass. He's playing his ass off. He's kind of just like that. Right. He's got almost like the same vibe as Bootsy.
Right.
And so it kind of, so that being said, a lot of funk music is on the one, and Bootsy probably was. Obviously, working with James Brown, you're going to keep it on the one, because James I work with James as well, but James liked it. Funk music, do what you want to do. Give me that solid one where everything is at. So, and then it's the space between the notes that defines the character of the funk.
Okay.
And then the syncopation can get in. So Bootsy will tell you himself, it's like whatever Bootsy told me is like James would be, I've even read it in the articles, you do whatever you do, give it to me on the one. Give me that downbeat.
Right.
Because or else if the drummer and the bassist and everybody's hitting it on the one, then you can start to work with the character of what that one is. Is it in front of the beat? The swagger of it. That's what I'm looking for. You start to find a certain swagger as a unit. So now you're hitting on the one, the drums are hitting on the one, and the horns might be in between the raindrops of the funk. So in between that space. So it's lanes. It's all these different lanes that add up. And when you listen to James and Bootsy, if you listen to Talking Loud and Saying Nothing, and as much as he's bouncing around, and we have to be, if you think about how these records were cut, they're all taked, they're all one takes, everybody in there. A lot of times you can hear it. But it's the lane, it's like, you had to play not just on the one, but you had to choose the octave to play so that if the bass was cut too low, when you mastering or pressing the record, it does, and you have horns and everything going on, you start to muddy the lanes up.
Right.
So a lot of things you'll hear in James Brown records, Bootsy might be playing up an octave, even though it sounds heavier, and he could have played lower, but because of the spacing and for it to be audible and to be clear on 45 records when you're mastering and cutting it, it's an art to that.
Right.
And it's the waveforms that a bass produces that can engulf a lot of things without even flinching.
Sure.
So Bootsy was young, around elders. It's almost like a mirror. We have a very similar vibe. And James Brown is a distant cousin of mine. My father's mother's maiden name is Brown. They're both from the same hometown. How
about that?
Yeah. So I didn't find out till later on in life. But so Bootsy came up in that discipline of music. Find the lane, hold the fort. Everybody's counting time. It's not just up to the drummer. You know what I mean? And it's discipline. So when you work in these repetitive environments, then you can find the freedom to curl. But you have to be able to have the sonic sound and the fundamental of rhythm and spacing, so James can do his splits and dance around and do the camel walk and scream and stuff, And But Bootsy's presence in James Brown's band was, in a sense, a proving ground for him. And then by the time he moved on to George Clinton, he's seasoned. He's been out on the road playing 1 million gigs. And James was like, you know, he's trying to stay fresh. Whereas when he heard Bootsy and Catfish, he was like, give me those 2 young boys. You know, so it's kind of like, you know, when you learn a lot when you're working with a singer. You learn a lot about discipline. You learn how to be on the back burner and you wait for the front burner to burn. And all of that gives you a certain character. So when it's time to perform, it's like you realize when that red light comes on, you know, that's real.
Right.
You know, and if you start sweating, you know, and choking and stuff like that, and there's going to be somebody else that's going to come in and replace you, and that's just there's no room for error.
Right.
So you learn how to lock and load. You learn it's okay to maybe make a few mistakes as long as you get right back to it, and it's part of the natural progression of making a process of making records. So Bootsy, and when you see him, he's playing, but if you look at Bootsy when he plays, look at his body. Look at the motion of how his legs are moving. It's like a train. It's like an old locomotive. He's like, the legs are going back and forth. So his time is coming from his body.
Right.
You know?
Sure.
So it's body time. It's body tempo, body mapping. And this is key when you're playing funk.
Sure.
It's key.
Sure.
So I learned a lot watching Bootsy. I saw Bootsy perform when I was about 13 in Springfield. I'll never forget. I'm like, man, I want to be like that. You know, you learn, and Bootsy probably was like, well, Doug, I was watching a lot of these old cats as well. Because he was in a band called, I think, the Four Horsemen or something like that, which was my friend Harold, Catfish, Bootsy, and somebody else. So you learn from your elders. You're like an apprentice.
Right.
You start off as an apprentice. You can play, but do you understand, you know, how to leave space? Because it's the space in between. The space is your ally, and when you clutter the space up, no matter how good you're playing, you're taking away the lane for other activity to happen. And because of the waveform of the bass, you might be grooving, but it's like the engineer's like, nah, man, I can't hear the baritone right now. I can't hear, the trumpets are getting muddy. Are you in tune? You know, you see, you have to learn a lot to understand, you know, to making records, especially when you were cutting vinyl.
Right.
It's a whole different ball game now. So Bootsy learned that, and by Bootsy paving that road, he paved the road for me.
Right.
He paved the road for me.
Right.
So my funk, thanks to Uncle Bootsy,
right,
and Bernie Worrell and other elders that were around that really were at the forefront of understanding how to groove naturally, without stutter and without and with a natural freedom, you know. And so you start to develop the shape of the note. As a bassist, we have a role. Play what you want. When you're playing with other people, understand the lane. Try to work to make everybody sound better. Right. Sacrifice the notes for yourself to lock with the drummer.
Sure.
Lock with the guitar player. Find that spacing, and when you hear it back after, you go, okay, that I knew I shouldn't have played those extra notes, because now that's happening. Because you're making records, you don't know what's going to go on after. Strings, horns, but right, make it funky. So being on the one is part of the funk. It really is. It's the first vowel in the alphabet in A E I O U, and sometimes funk.
Right. There you go. That's awesome. Well, all that experience and the studio experience as well as the performing experience then had to pay off when you made the move over to England.
Yes.
And you started meeting people like Jeff Beck and Mick Jagger and the Stones and all the incredible artists you played with over there.
Yeah. So, again, it's funny, you know, when Sugar Hill became successful, you know, Rapper's Delight was cut, and that was, to this day, one of the largest selling 12 inches of all time. It's days of 12 inches. And it was interesting, you know, it's funny because in America, between some of my peers, some of my musicians that I was around, they were like, what are you doing playing this stuff? This is, you know, come on, man, I know you can hit. I've seen you play this and that. I'm like, I'm trying to keep my lights on, man. I'm sitting there trying to survive, man. This is a job for me and stuff. So a lot of folks didn't get it, right? but the English always got it. You know, as they got the blues, as they got other things, you know, they've managed to get it. So by doing the Sugar Hill record stuff, there was a period where English musicians came to visit Sugar Hill because, see, here's the deal. We were cutting, it was a formula. We were cutting hit after hit after hit. I mean, it's beyond. Every record, a lot of the records at first they were hits because there was a formula, right? And with every formula, people want to know what that formula is. Formula is very simple. Formula is, you have to, in order to, you can play music, but you have to see the reaction of other people that are going to dance to that music. And if they're grooving, then that's a good gauge. So how we judged the songs to record was very simple. Grandmaster Flash would spit at a club called the Fever in the South Bronx. Sometimes Sylvia Robinson would go to Disco Fever to see what Flash is spinning. He might have something obscure. He'd take a Duel at Diablo guitar riff against an old Clyde Stubblefield breakbeat and make it all work. So all we would do is just watch what Flash is spinning and watch the people get on the dance floor. You could just watch your gauge was, are the girls and guys getting up jamming to something that they never heard of, but they're digging Flash. Right. So you sit back and watch. Sylvia and I would lock eyes because something would jump off and we'd be like, wow, they're really grooving off of it. So I make some notes on a Friday. On Monday, we're in the studio recording this stuff. And that was not rocket science. It was just, it's just doing some research in real time, then sitting around guessing what's going to happen, watch what a DJ's doing, seeing if you can emulate that. So that was one of our formulas. So a lot of hits started to be recorded. And the English guys were curious. So one of the first English bands to come over was Glenn Tifford from Squeeze. They came over, oh, what's going on with this Sugar Hill stuff? This is interesting. And then Stuart Copeland from the Police came by. And the horn section, Chop's horn section that was recording on all of the Police tracks, all of the Sugar Hill tracks, they started to, they were their own independent organization as well. They were recording a lot of other folks. So Sting came over to the studio one time to see what's going on at Sugar Hill. And then we had other arrangers, Pete Wingfield, who was an English arranger. He so we kind of, Joe and Silver were always kind of, had their eyes and ears on people that were from England. They had a nice relationship with because they sold a lot of records over in England even before Sugar Hill. English folks started to come and investigate what's going on, what's up with this sound, right? So that took place. And that kind of gave us a little bit of an awakening for guys. So guys are like, okay, we like the rap stuff. Who are these musicians cutting this stuff? Wow. Right. So we were like, like the Motown we were like one of the only self-contained bands that was cutting, the first and only self-contained bands that was cutting hip-hop, but we also cut a lot of other records. So they came over, trying to see, okay, man, this is curious. Meanwhile, in America, other guys here are like, this is a fad, it's going to play out, I'm not interested, right? Until it didn't play out, until they started to realize that it's going from a regional scene to an international scene. Right. Okay, and then at that point, people are like, okay, now here's something different. You had rock and roll, you had blues, you had all of these things. But because it was hip hop and musicians were tuned to like these frequencies, they couldn't get past some of the inharmonic or untunings, things that weren't in tune that was coming from a DJ or whatever. You had to figure out how to translate what a rapper and a DJ is trying to do and not sterilize it. Right. So for example, we would cut some records and some of the rappers they present an idea. Some of the rappers we start to play it back. You just look at the rappers, they'd be like, guys, can you stop? What you're doing sounds like it's for an older crowd right about now. So that there was always enough people to keep everybody in check. Cut it again. What are you feeling? Well, just, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's it. Do that. So there was a lot of interaction going on. But at the same time, we weren't getting a lot of support from our peers that were in America because they just didn't embrace hip hop. They didn't see it as something that was, they saw it as, let's just say, it just wasn't, you know, cats are swinging, cats are, you know, hitting. A lot of music's out at that time. I said, it's just a bunch of rubbish. But Sugar Hill stuff was cut well and really tight. So after a while, people warmed up to it, and then when some of our friends started to get more involved in hip-hop, it changed. So anyway, English guys came by. Mm-hmm. That got the eyes and ears of the rhythm section, and then it was a sequence of events. Then Sugar Hill kind of fizzled out, went over to work at Tommy Boy Records with Africa Bambaataa, did some stuff there. Now we're making better money, better studios, and we're in New York City. Sugar Hill was in Inglewood, New Jersey. Now we're over the river working in New York City. Then we got the eyes and ears of Arthur Baker, a producer. Mm-hmm. And he did Planet Rock, stuff like that. And then he went on to become quite a huge remixer, taking a Mick Jagger single and flipping it out for dance stuff. And I became his studio bassist. Okay. So it was there that the connection was made to Mick Jagger, to Jeff Beck. It's Arthur Baker that connected the dots for me.
Right.
So in one session, you know, I would record he was, you know, doing maybe 1 or 2 songs on a Jeff Beck record like Flash, and then something with other artists. Then I'm working at the Key Studios, Unique Recording, Electric Ladyland, you know, a few of the heavy. I started to work in the Key Studios,
right.
Start building a reputation. But it was Arthur Baker that really turned me on. It was Little Stevie Van Zandt. The record that we did collectively called Sun City Artists United Against Apartheid,
right.
At that time, was a record that had maybe 50 different artists on it. I was the principal bass player on that, and it was Bono, Stevie Winwood, Bruce Springsteen, Peter Gabriel, you know, some of the Stones, Miles Davis. So it was on. So one record, I had the blessing of working with all of these artists. It was like
amazing.
I hit the daily double, right?
Right.
So in the process of doing all of that happening, Arthur Baker's producing a couple of songs for Jeff Beck. I get asked to play on it. Jeff hears it. He's like, "Who's the bass player?" "Oh, it's Doug Wimbish. Would you like to meet him?" "Yeah." So Arthur sets up a meeting, more like a jam at Electric Ladyland Studios, to meet Jeff. And it was just Jeff, another drummer, and myself in the studio. And that was the beginning. And then I had started to go to England at that time. I had met Adrian Sherwood prior with Tack Hits. So that's happening like 1984. This is 1985, like right all within the same year. And that became the key turning point for me working at rock and roll. Jeff asked if I was able to come to England. I'm like, well, I'm already going to be going over there. "Would you like to come over for a gathering?" he said. That's what. Sure. So I went over. We did like a jam at the Rainbow, an old famous place in London, an old theater, and in Finsbury Park. And the rest is history. And then I got asked and invited to participate in a tour that Jeff was doing with Jan Hammer was the keyboard player, Simon Phillips was the drummer, and I was the bass player. And dude.
What an amazing band.
Yeah, but you should have saw the look on my face when I walked in that room the first time with those 3 monsters in there, and Jeff. And Jeff was, you know, I was a new kid on the block. We ended up doing a tour of Japan, and on that tour, it was a package of Jeff Beck with Santana, my heroes, and Buddy Miles is singing lead at that time, right? Coming off the heels of the California Raisins singing that.
Right.
Alfonso Johnson's on bass, great. And the artist in residence was Steve Luthica. Toto had blew up.
Right.
Putting together these huge packages. So that was my first real rock and roll gig.
Wow.
Ever. And, you know, thank you, Arthur Baker. Thank you, Little Steven. Thank you, all of my elders that believed. And Jeff really put me on. Did the tour. Jeff had did the first Mick Jagger solo record. She's the Boss. Now Mick is up to do his second solo record. So after the tour we did, you know, Jeff and I, you know, became kind of tight. I'm hanging out at his flat in Westbourne Grove in London. He's like, you know, Dougie, I'm asked to do Mick's next solo record, and I'd like to put your name in the hat, you know, for playing bass on it. I'm not gonna, sure. I'm like, yeah. So he did, and it's just by coincidence. I'm in the studio, a Unique Recording, and I'm working with a producer named Keith Diamond. Keith Diamond produced Caribbean Queen by Billy Ocean. Is, you know, big record. And at that time he did well. Now he's producing Michael Bolton. So I'm in the studio with Michael Bolton doing one of his first records, The Hunger, I believe. And at that time, Keith Diamond got asked to be a producer on Mick Jagger's solo record. So I got Jeff recommending me. Did a session for Keith Diamond. We hit it off, fellow bass player as well. And then he said, man, Doug, I like you. I want to recommend you for the Mick Jagger gig as well. Cool, so I have 2 guys recommending me, but regardless, there were 40 different bass players that they auditioned between New York, LA, and London. So I ended up going to a classic cattle call audition in New York and just kind of like, not really, so I got asked to participate in a rehearsal, audition. They send out a tape of songs that you're going to do.
Right.
But it didn't mean anything because that's not what but when you got to the rehearsal, when you got to the audition, you didn't do those songs.
Nice.
The songs were just a template. Really, the audition was to see how your character was and see how you would be able to adapt to doing something on the spot different.
Right.
Which really kind of what took place, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's right up my alley because of my training at Sugar Hill and All Platinum Records and everything, being in these environments where it's like hip hop, change, do this, move, sideways. It wasn't something that was that was always consistent. So I was used to, okay, that bass line sounds good, forget that, let's start all over again. And I'm not getting wigged out. I'm like, so when Mick and them was like, don't worry about what we sent you. We're going to try a couple of the new songs. Like, let's go. So I wasn't necessarily, I kind of trained for that. You know what I mean? Over the years, I was kind of trained. And then they filmed and auditioned. The next thing you know, and I get the gig. Nice. Mick calls me, and the rest is history.
That's awesome.
Sorry about the long story, but it's just
it's
a sequence of events.
But that's the way the industry works, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's all the step by step, and one thing builds on another, and the relationships. And
it really is like that. The key is patience and understanding the lane, and not brown nosing or trying to come off too hard. Because I knew I'm a Stones fan, I'm a Jagger fan, but I'm also a fan of a lot of music, and I wasn't getting necessarily drunk on the idea of working with Mick Jagger or anything like that. For me, it was a great opportunity. But if it worked out, it did. If it didn't work out, hey, I hope it works out for whoever gets the gig.
Sure.
And that's how I looked at it.
Right.
And as you're walking out of these auditions, you see all your mates coming in and out as well. So it's a bit, but I'm thankful I got the gig.
Yeah, no doubt. So the story goes, if I understand correctly, that basically at the same time you had offers from Bruce Springsteen, the Stones, and Living Colour.
Okay, here's how that went. I have to backtrack on that a little bit. So I did mix solo tours, right? We did the record, recorded Right Track Studios, Vislord Studios in Holland, remixed again at Right Track. I got to set the record straight. And I've known Vernon for a while. Actually, Vernon auditioned as well for Mick Jagger's solo record.
Is that right?
At the time. Yeah. Didn't work out, but at the same time, Living Colour was making a little bit of noise. Mick comes to me and he's like, hey, Dougie, I hear about this band, Living Colour. Do you know the guys? Yeah, Vernon's a good mate of mine. As a matter of fact, hey, man, they're playing the CBGBs. Why don't you and Jeff go see them? Why don't you and Jeff go down and check them out? Right. Let me know how it goes. I don't want to, just so it happens natural. Mick comes back the next day. And he's like, Dougie, I like the band. What do you think? Hey, you're Mick Jagger, man. You bust out all these blues cats. You can do whatever you want to do. Take them in the studio, do some work with them. So he did. And fast forward, they get put on. Mick is working with Living Colour. They get put on, get some record deal, blah 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 blah. Fast forward. So then that runs its course. After Living Colour puts two records out and an EP, then they're about to make a bass change. I'm in Los Angeles, I'm producing a band called the Booyah Tribe out there, these Samoan rappers. And Living Colour was out there, so I'm producing it, and I'm like, okay, they were fans of Living Colour, love Corey. I'm like, well, I know Corey, let's get him to come in and sing. They're like, yeah, really? So we're at Crystal Studios in LA. Corey came in and sang on one of the songs. Sly Stone's playing on it, George Clinton. It was a great record, never came out though, but it was a great record. So, I get Corey on it, get Vernon on it. Will, the drummer's there, wanted to get him on the record, but didn't work out. He said, oh man, I wanted to play on that record. I said, oh man, next time. So, but we became friends. I'm in London. And you know how they say things happen in threes. So I'm in the studio with Adrian Sherwood at his house up Muswell Hill. And this was one of those really deep weeks because we were cutting tracks nonstop for a bunch of different artists. I'm like 25 songs in for the week, not even joking. I get a call from Will Calhoun. Hey, Doug, what's happening, man? Cool. And I knew he was coming over to do a drum clinic. He's like, dig this. Thinking about making a bass. We're making a bass change. And, you know, he said, I would really like for you to you know, I like your vibe, and really like for you to do the gig. You know, he understood, you know, we had a great chemistry. But out of fairness, we're going to audition cats. So, no problem. So would you like to come over audition? Sure. So Will calls me first. About 24 hours after that, Seal calls me up. And I had been working with Seal doing his record, because I did his first solo record with Trevor Horn. And Seal went from busking and squatting in London. Now he's got a little bit of paper. Now he's put on. And we were tight. We were always hanging out. When he blew up, we were doing a lot of music. So Seal was like, yo, Dougie, man, I'm blowing up right now. I want you to come and MD for me. You know, I got some dates. Okay. So, okay, I'll get back to you. Okay. 24 hours after that, I get a call from Debbie Gold, who was representing Bruce Springsteen. And I get this whole conversation. I get this, hey, I'm Debbie Gold. I heard, you know, your name's recommended, blah, 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 blah. About 10 minutes. I'm not going to tell you who you're going to work for first, but till I tell you all this stuff. So I'm sitting there listening to this. Okay, cool. Okay, the gig is with Bruce Springsteen. I'm like, oh, wow, that's great. So, you know, so what I did in a situation like that is I always, whoever calls me first, I go with that. Number one. Number two, the reality of what would take place for me if I was to join Living Colour. I have equity in the band and everything. As working for Seal and or Bruce Springsteen, I'll be employed. Right. Now I ended up going to do the audition for Living Colour. Never forget, because I flew back from England to America just for like 48 hours. And I flew into a friggin' hurricane. I should have known something was going on. It's Halloween. I flew into a friggin' hurricane. I'm like, wow. Go there, do the audition. I had about 3 days to learn some of the Living Colour songs, which I kind of knew, but I kind of pick up songs fast. I said, okay, in a situation like this, here's what you do. I said, I'll learn the hardest thing first, that I think is the hardest thing. So I learned Time's Up. It's really, really fast. Right. Crazy, right? It's, you know, a lot of time change. I'll learn that first. Go to the audition. All right, so to Doug, what do you want to do? I said, all right, well, let's do Time's Up. Everybody's like, so the silence between Will, Vernon, and Corey. I'm like, did I say something wrong? He said, no. He said, you're the only bass player that would play that song. Nobody else could play the song. Wow. So I was like, let's play it. So I ended up playing it. And basically what happened was they wanted to make a bass change from Muzzy. And they still had a couple of gigs on the books, one of which was like, let's just say, you heard of Rock in Rio? The same thing, but the different sponsor was called Hollywood Rock, same festival, right? They had that on the books still for earlier the following year. So this is October of like 1991. It's October 31st, 1991. Can't forget that date. And the gig that they had for Hollywood Rock was in January. Right. So I ended up, didn't have the gig. I ended up, we're going to, you know, did the audition, we'd like to get you to do the gig, but I wasn't offered the Living Colour gig yet. So so we got back, flew to London. Okay, we're going to have rehearsals, a couple more weeks, flew back right before the, about 3 weeks before the event was going to take place in Brazil. And go back, start rehearsing. We were there for like 10 days. The first 7 days was just flutter and jam with Living Colour. They're all, hey, let's try this. We're going to do this. I'm like, so after day 7, I'm like, guys, it would be good if we can get a set list so I could know exactly what to focus on. Right. Thank you very, I'm loving everything that's going on. Right. So at the end of the day, I had 3 days to really rehearse for the gig, really, because it was like, okay, we're going to do these songs, so I was able to prep it up. And then after that gig, they offered me, after the 2 performances, I got offered to join Living Colour. Now, that was a little bit trippy because on the same event was Seal. Nice. you know. Right. And out of all the gigs on earth, there's 365 days out the year. The gig that he wanted me to do was the same gig he's doing.
Wow.
So I can't be in two places at the same time.
Right.
But I found a way to do it anyway. So it was like he's my mate, and then Wendy and Lisa were in the band. Mm-hmm. So then Trevor's hooking it up, the ZTT, his label and everything. So it was a little, we were mates, and he was like, man, I really wanted you to do this gig. Well, I'm like, sorry, man. I'm honest with you. I took the, first call came from Will. I told him, and I didn't want to get too cluttered up, so I'm sorry. So I said, but what else do you have on the books? I'll do a couple other, I'll do whatever I can do with you and maybe help you out to find another bass player. So I ended up doing the Grammy Awards with Seal. Mm-hmm. And Elton John and Princess Di had the Princess Di's Trust in England, and I ended up doing an event over there. It was Princess Di and Elton John, which I did not meet either one of them. It was like, but you see him from a distance, but I ended up doing that gig. And that was it. But, and when you're faced with situations like that, it's important to be honest and just try not to get caught in the crossfire of frequencies. Right. And also look at what's going to be best for yourself and your family. Mm-hmm. And what so that's what happened. Right. That's kind of exactly what happened.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing.
It's amazing how things happen,
It is, yeah. So clearly it worked out great.
Yeah.
So as a guitar player myself, I'm curious, you've worked with, as we mentioned, Satriani, Beck, and of course Vernon Reid, and all three of those are virtuosic guitar players,
that's
but
amazing.
very, very different players also. As a bass player, when you step into situations with those three very different players, does your approach change?
Yes.
How do you work that?
Well, first of all, it's all about the music. You have to study up. Mm-hmm. You have to understand the frequencies of the players and their mindset. Joe has all three have different characters, right? Let's look at Jeff, the first elder. He's free form. He's just a natural, gifted player. He plays without a pick, kind of just mind-boggling what he can get out of a telly and a simple amp. Yeah. Beyond, effortless, having a laugh. He's happy to be working on his cars. Comes in his jam and he's got grease on the fingernails. He's having a good time.
Right.
Joe Satriani, I ended up recommending Joe for the Mick Jagger solo gig. That's how we got the gig, and our history with Joe is even deeper than because we met at the NAMM show in Chicago. I'm sitting down playing the theme from Get Smart or something like that, and I look up and it's Joe looking at me with those eyes. He's a Tackhead fan because he was living in San Francisco. Oh, nice. So I had recommended for when Jeff Beck had the chair to do Mick's solo gig tour, decided not to do it. We're sitting around trying to come up with solutions for a guitarist at that time, and I recommended Joe. Nobody knew of him, and everybody else had more seniority, so they got other guys recommending guys. I said, I got a guy, and I know it'd be great, Joe Satriani. Jagger's there, Simon. Oh yeah, I said, I got a couple album covers of his. I'll bring a couple albums down. Now this is before Surfing with the Alien came out. Right. So Joe's first two album covers, it had like the Buffon hairstyle and everything. Right. So as soon as I laid those albums down, oh no, this isn't gonna work for that. And so I said, yo, this guy, I felt bad. I'm like, that guy's gonna be bigger than toilet tissue. You watch. And I just, just bowed out gracefully because I thought Joe would be great. Fast forward, Joe, about a few months later, Mick calls me. He's like, Dougie, I said, what's up, Mick? I gotta apologize to you. So what are you talking about? That guitar player you were talking about, Joe Satriani? I said, yeah. He said, yeah, we're gonna use him for the next tour. And that's great because Joe ended up hooking up with Bill Graham. Bill Graham was the promoter on the tour. It's great. Joe has another frequency, and me and Joe hit it off like this. Mm-hmm. He's really, I like Joe. I like his frequency because he's badass. I mean, the stuff that he does is just like Jesus, Right. But I love it. But we had a really interesting kind of like respect for each other and our uniqueness and stuff. And I was learning a lot from Joe because he's precise. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Right. Very precise. When I was playing with Joe, it was very kind of like the demos. Joe played bass on it. He's playing with a pick and a wicked Fender precision bass. So I learned how to articulate the character for Joe Satriani best that I could. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Best to my ability because he's really precise. And Vernon is Vernon. Vernon is coming from a whole nother harmonic kind of vibe, and each three of these guys have their own unique frequency, And each one of them, I was able to find a way to try to make them sound better through rhythm. You know what I mean? Through just the fundamentals of playing on that one and giving you that constant frequency. And I think all three of them dug it. So, but again, you have to study up. You have to listen to the music first. You just don't dive in, but also read up. Just read, see have a conversation with the guys. So I get on. Me and Vernon and I have known each other for years. So he's come and hang out with me at my place in New York, chop it up. Even before Living Color was done, he dreamed, I want to do this when we were doing Tack Head. I want to do this. I'm like, let's go for it, man. Then up in the band, and so I became friends with each of those guitarists. And when you befriend somebody, then you can start. And you're not just working as I'm showing up to do a gig and then I'm leaving and we're not having a meal or chopping it up or talking about whatever. You miss out a lot of what can really happen, because music is a reflection of your life, in my opinion. How you live, it comes out in your music. So to enjoy the conversation of somebody, conversations lead to frequencies.
Right.
That's how songs are done by you. Something might trigger something, a word you have. Oh man, that's dope. Why don't we do that? You're sitting at dinner. You're talking about this, listening to some music on the radio. Man, that's dope. Man, wouldn't it be great if you did blah? So my whole approach is everybody's an individual. Give them the time. Find the time to understand, what's going on. Jeff, you have to dive back. I have to look back into his catalog, the things that he's done. The shape of the note. Right. What other bass players did.
Right.
All those prior to me being involved. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. Joe was a little bit easier because he was playing bass. Right. On the first stuff, even though somebody else didn't. And there was a lot of documented stuff that I had to grab on, but I was a friggin' fan. It's my brother. Joe gave me my first whammy pedal. Nice. That's how the whammy pedal came. Right. Because we're tight like that, and he loved the Tack Head so much, the band. That when he would come around, we gave him a Tack Head hat. He wore that hat for 2 years. If you look at the early photos of Joe, he's got the Tack Head. He wore the T off the tack on the hat. Had to give him another hat. Nice. So these three separate individuals all have their shapes of how they play, but it's also everybody has a different rhythm factor. Right. You know what I mean? Everybody, rhythm is a key, and if they know that you're solid enough to be able to create the lane for them to launch on, then it's great. So when I'm playing around cats like that, I want Jeff to be able to. I want to be as solid as possible, but free, not stiff, and then create a character that matches Jeff Beck. Right. I want to match that. So I study. And I listen to the records, and I listen to the shape of the note. Do I play a fretless on this like Fernando Saunders did? Do I play? I have to emulate what Jan Hammer's doing on bass synth, And so you figure you get challenged by the characters by the songs. Right. And Jeff's just bad. He's just beyond. Right. I mean, just one note sounds, he's just so bad. He's, I love you, Jeff. So it's kind of like, so everybody has their own character. And I just learned how to, before I play a note, before I walk over to my bass to play it, I listen. I listen for a while. And then once I can memorize where things are going, where the next shape is, where the next move is, then I pick the instrument. Right. Because only then do I really know what's going on, or I'm just going to start tucking in with my character without giving the music the opportunity, without I learning the music from the core root. And if asked to move into another hemisphere, at least I understand the fundamental of where the bass is at. And a lot of times people want to upgrade or do whatever, but at least I understand the shape of the notes. Right. If that makes it. I understand the shape of the notes and the character of the tone. And that's kind of what I like to do. And with Living Color, it's kind of like Vernon's just gone. He's just there. You know what I mean? So our combination is very unique because Vernon has a whole nother frequency, and with Living Color, I just try to hold it down. Mm-hmm. It's like a freight train sometimes. That's going downhill. I mean, it's going uphill or sideways. It's like at Six Flags. Sometimes it just starts to spin. The centrifugal force is beyond with Living Color. Right. The sonic centrifugal force can be very challenging. So with Will's going in And Corey is climbing up on the speakers and screaming, and Vernon's, going and doing his thing, and then Vernon's so amazing a guitarist. He's always going for it. You know what I mean? So my whole goal is, how do I make everybody sound better? I'll sacrifice the notes, and then when needed, I'll throw in a couple little tidbits just to keep everybody, aligned.
Right.
So all three, good choice. I learned every one of those guys. I learned a lot from Jeff, English guitar player, a lot of history. Mm-hmm. He put me on, it's Jeff Beck. When I worked with, I have this Spectre bass because of Jeff Beck. Mm-hmm. All the other things that you get from working with a person like Jeff, who's as chill can be. You're playing, he's not like, no, play that note. No, he's just like, yeah, Dougie, yeah, man, let's go. Okay, let's do this. Never once was he like, no, man, I'm not feeling that or that. He has such a open mind because, you can hear it in the music.
Right.
You can hear it in the music. It's like you choose the players that can contribute to the landscape.
Right.
That's Jeff. Joe's different. Joe's more articulate. He's like, nope, let's make that sharper. Is it in tune? Okay, and then the play, Joe's tight. I mean, he's pitch perfect, beyond. So when you're working with somebody like Joe, you go, and then I would go from working with a Joe to working with a Jeff to working with a Living Color, all in maybe in within a couple of weeks. So I have to align I have to reboot the hard drive a little bit every time I'm going to work with one of those folks, just to stay into the character that I need to play. Right. Because sometimes you have to be on the front burner, and other times you have to be on the back burner, and you have to be solid no matter where you are. If I'm in the front, if I'm in the back, if I'm the T-boy, whatever it takes, I want to get the job done.
Right. Awesome. So you mentioned something that I want to talk about really quickly here. You have a lot of electronic toys here, and we're going to do another video where we come back and kind of look at what you got going on there. What's interesting to me is a phrase you used several times, which is shape of the note.
Right.
And watching you play, you have, I think, a wider variety of articulations that you use to attack your bass than just about any player that I've ever seen. Can you talk a little bit about that, how you developed all those different articulations and how you apply them in a different situation?
Good question. Just from playing, okay, we all have things that we like, that we prefer to play. What I've done in my career is find a way to put myself in a situation that I'm uncomfortable, and then find a way to be comfortable. That's the key. So in doing that, you can learn a lot. So if I continue to do things that I know that I can shine on, that's all great. But I'm missing out on all these other things that I can. You look in the sky, there's a trillion stars. If I'm just focusing on one, then what about all the other ones? So I found over time to work with a diverse, with many different styles of music. And in doing that is how I learned, because each one is a character. So for example, when I was doing early hip hop, it's a lot of fundamentals that are going on. I'm playing straight bass, but I'm also given because the bass was so in your face, and they were giving me the shine to play these classic tracks, but also add all these other rhythms and frequencies. I was fortunate. I'm doing the same stuff. If you listen to some of those early Sugar Hill tracks in 1980, some of the similar styles I was doing in the early 80s, I was doing in 1974. I had been doing that for a while. It's just I was given opportunities through songs and artists to start to be able to develop different characters. So I look at it as characters. Okay. It's like, method acting, or whatever. You have a Robert De Niro that's a great actor. So I watch how people do their craft and try to find ways how to reenact, not necessarily from a musician, but from an actor or from an athlete. How do you learn how does Michael Jordan dunk that ball? Right. And then what happened also is I'm just watching what's around. Not only was I focused on learning the instrument and listening to bass players, but I'm listening to everybody: keyboard players, drummers, tabla players, xylophone player. Listening to Frank Zappa's band, you know, you listen to Village of the Sun and all the different key changes. I'm like, that's crazy. How do you, and also listening to a Jocko or listening to a Stanley Clarke or listening to Sly or whatever, how do you jump from these characters, right? Now, rhythmically, I always liked working with drummers. So I learn a lot from working with the drummers that I'm working with. So like, you know, working with the Dennis Chambers, I learn a different character. Working with Simon Phillips, I learn a different character to play, you know, and then I'm like a parrot. I try to emulate some of the things that I hear through rhythm. So even though I may not be playing bass notes, I try to also articulate drum patterns or percussive patterns that aren't necessarily attached to a note.
Okay.
You know, and that's kind of like, so I start to assemble different characters. Jocko character. How do you go from, and then I combine the characters on a plate. How do I go from playing a harmonic riff to playing a bootsy kind of frequency with an effect to playing to acting like I'm Trilok Gertrude or a tabla player or whatever, or Mongo Santa Maria, a percussion player, Tito Puente playing timbales.
Right.
You know, so I'm listening to the other rhythms that are around and picking up rhythm with, you know, just percussive rhythms. And so I try to find a way how in a phrase, when the opportunity is there, to create these sonic frequencies, rhythms, bell tones, harmonics, whatever, all within a passage. How do you get in and out? How do you segue between, you know, going into these different styles? So that became a thing. And then you know, when you grow up in the studio and you watch, you're learning different people perform, and you're learning from watching people perform. After a while, you know, it rubs off. So you're in a situation having a conversation with somebody. Yeah, man, I was seeing Omar Hakim playing. Yo, man, I like how he's doing his hi-hat. You know, so I'm like, I wonder. Let me try to emulate that on my bass rhythmically.
Right.
That's all it is. So I started to study more about not just the notes as well, but the rhythm. How is a drummer doing what he's doing? Because if I understand what he's doing, then I can understand how to play in between the phrases, or play with him, or attach myself in a 4-bar phrase. Like I could start off here, but tag along with that last bar of what the drummer's doing, so we're hitting it all together. So I started just kind of like, you know, reenacting the rhythm of the different players that I'm playing with. Simon Phillips is great because he'll be playing and he'll be playing one rhythm, look you dead in the eye, and he's flipped it, and he's looking at you in the eyes with those eyes, and he's smiling. And then, you know, so now I have to understand how to keep the rhythm, because he's going to flip it back. And when he flips it back, then I'm going to flip it on him. Right. You know what I mean? But he showed me a lot of that, so I started doing the same thing that he showed me to be able to let him know I'm learning your characters. Does it make any sense?
Sure.
That's all it is. So after time, whoever you're working with, doesn't matter whether a named person or a person that's in your neighborhood. You know, I've learned more from local cats that I've worked with than a lot of folks, you know, that still to this day, just you go around and you see everybody's unique. So I studied a lot of rhythm, and I try to find ways to reenact the rhythm in a percussive way, right? Then I started to look at what other ways can I get sounds? Can I get it from a glass? Can I act like I'm a DJ scratching, right? Right. Can I reenact like the sound of a violin section, or a Jeff Beck lick that I learned? You know what I mean? It's just, you just acquire these phrases, and can you segue in and out quickly and still hold a groove? Right. Can you still hold a groove? And when you do that, you start to get you develop a character. You start, and sometimes songs are faster, so I have characters that are for faster approaches. Other things, when they're slower, and there's you know, you can actually hear if the stuff's right or wrong when things are slow. There's nothing like playing a ballad to hear what somebody's vibe is. So when you start to work with different tempos and understand, you start to understand how to apply rhythm across it. Still keep it on the one if need be, like Bootsy says. Or am I just ahead of the groove on bar 3, but bar 1 and 2 and 4 are swaggered. But bar 3 is ahead a little bit, just for the character. and then and that character might be ahead by rhythm, not necessarily notes, but it all adds up if I know the drummer's going to do that.
Right.
I know the character of the drummer, or Jeff's going to do this, or Vernon's going to do that. So I listen, and I wait for the lane. And the reality of it is the notes you're not playing, the space is your best ally. Silence. To understand how to create a frequency, and then for those microseconds, you're stopping, and then you're harmonically moving with the music, you know. It's almost like it's like you're a bus driver and you stop and you're dropping off, but you're picking up another passenger.
Right.
But you're moving in such, it's happening in such a, you just hear the air brakes go shh, door open shh, then you catch up to where the, you know, where the other traffic's going.
Right.
And then that traffic hits a red light and you know it's going to hit the light. So it's just timing. So I kind of, you know, through experimentation, I not only is it the notes, but it's the shape of the note, like I say, and it's also the spacing. And that comes from, that comes from all the people that I've worked with. Mm-hmm. That's all it is. It's just everybody you work with, you understand the swagger, you learn their character, or you're just sitting there going, I'm going to play my stuff and I'm not going to learn anything else. And I'm not that kind of player. If I'm playing, I want to make you sound the best you can possibly sound, and knowing that you don't have to worry about me shifting or doing this or that. I'll play as solid as you want me to play. What's next? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the mindset. So I become that character actor of a bass player.
Right.
And you learn so much if you do it. You're listening to all styles: reggae, calypso, funk, Indian music. I learned a lot from working with tabla players. That's fascinating. Or working with sitar players over in the UK, because their level of intelligence. If you're working with Indian players, they're like they're dealing with sooties. There's like between one note, there's 25 different degrees here. Right. On 25 different degrees there. And when you start to hear that and somebody's spelling it out and you're watching it, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
And when you can't do it, it's like, if you're patient, you could ask somebody, can you help show me how you break it down? And then guys be like, no problem, here's what we're going to count on our finger. 1, 2, 3, 4. They use their hands to, it's kind of like this. I'm like, yeah, man, this is natural things. So you pick it up, and after a while, you know, if you can get it, you can show it to somebody else. Right? Some people pick up things more natural. And I like showing somebody else that I know they might have a different approach on it. So like, yo, check this out. I'm checking this out. But you're really going to be able to nail it because you're already there.
Right.
Share that information. Keep learning from each other.
Right. It's awesome. So much great stuff. Yeah. Doug, thanks so much for coming in.
Oh, man.
Appreciate you taking time
It's all
today.
right, man. It's all right.
It's
a pleasure being here at Sweetwater. What a great place.
Thank
Very
you.
thankful.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you sharing so much with us today. Lots of wisdom there. Yeah. Lots to take away. So, yeah. And we're looking forward to the workshop you're going to be doing. I'm sure some great stuff's going to come out of that. And please come back.
Oh, I would love to. If you guys have me, I'll be here.
Right on.
Thank you, guys.
Look forward to it.
All right.
And thank you for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute. I'm Mitch Gallagher.